Hey, sorry I got started a little late here. I was having trouble getting it set up, so let me know if the sound is good. So today we're probably going to talk about the E3 dip and see what's going on with it. I want to see how well it works. Just got it in the mail. So it's going to be kind of interesting, I hope. Maybe they fix some things, maybe not. But it's obviously a little quiet out there right now. So how's the sound on your side? I can see a couple people here. I got the E3 dip the other day, so I'm gonna take a look at it. So it comes with some cooling fins, of course. Gonna move this over to the side and bring up the little tester. Got it situated here real quick. So we have two boards. One is the 1.0, the other one is the 1.1. So I gotta open this up real quick. We'll see if there's any differences between the boards that we can actually physically see. So it comes with the drive. It's 128 megabits, probably. It looks almost exactly the same, but of course I'm looking from a different angle right now. So let's take a closer look around it. So I'm guessing the processor might be different, but that's just a guess. It looks like it's got EEPROM, and all of the wiring looks almost exactly the same. So I'm hoping they didn't just name it Big Tree Tech SKR E3 dip version 1.1, but that actually there's functionality that's changed. So we're gonna test some of the functionality, and you know, one of the key tests is probably working with, let's think about this, the TMC steppers. So the first thing I like to do on the board is actually look up what is going on with the board. So I'm going to go over to the web browser in a second. Let me just check on the chat. It's still a little quiet. So what's going on here is these two boards are very similar. So I'll just start rolling and wait for people to show up. So as you can see, we have the SKR Mini. That's not what we're working with, but we're looking for the E3 dip, which is not here. So we're going to search on E3 dip, and it's only got the 1.0 version. So let's see if we can see anything here that might lead us to know about the other board. It says it modified the servo port on the hardware board. So let's see if we can find an actual pinout diagram. So this is the pinout diagram for 1.1. So servo port, where is it? So it's probably going to be near where the BL touch is, but it says servo port right here. So PA1, 5 volts ground. Let's see if we can find the older version. So the pinout is 1.1 here, so let's look at this one. So it looks like they had them reversed. So you have ground 5 volts. That might actually not be correct, but let's verify. So 5 volt ground. So they did reverse those. So they had those backwards, so probably the BL touch didn't work very well, or you had to do jumpers. So what we're going to do next is we're going to actually try and load the 1.0 again, because we had issues with the actual stepper, and there is a workaround for the problem. With the TFT display, we could probably print through there and not have the issues with the USB, but let's see if it's fixed. So let me check on the chat real quick here. Okay, we got people now. So for those that don't know, I'm going to compare two boards today, being the E3 dip version 1.0 and the E3 dip version 1.1. And the difference that we discovered so far is that the servo port is slightly different. And all they're saying is they changed the wiring on the silk screen so that it should be in the right place of a servo. So let's give this a try. So I'm first going to do steppers, or even just power up the board and see what it looks like in Pronterface. Sorry, I gotta restart it here real quick. So all I'm gonna do first is just see if I can connect to the board. So I'll show you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go over to the workbench. I'm gonna find the cable that goes to it. It's gonna take me a second because I've got way too many cables. Sorry about this. There's one cable. It's not it. Here it is. So I'm going to leave this out for the moment and just connect to it. So it's powered up. Let me fix this so it doesn't slide around. All I'm trying to get an understanding for is, does it work? So we're going to plug it in and see what happens. Okay, so I'm gonna go over to VS Code in a second. I just have to set up my monitor so I can see what's going on here. It's gonna take 2 seconds to realign it. Every time I reboot the computer or turn it off, it changes. So here's Pronterface. So we need to find the port. It's just a brand new board. It's probably not this, because if we hit connect, it's not going to work. So we'll go to Device Manager. And inside Device Manager, if I can get it over to the screen, we'll see if there's a COM port. So it says 9. So we'll go over here and we'll backspace and add a 9. Then we'll connect. And now it says connected printers online, so it has firmware. So the next thing we can do is do an M 119 to see if all the steppers are unclicked or triggered in this case because nothing's connected. So we know that it works. I think there's an M205, might be 502. Apparently that doesn't work, so M500, M501. This is the EEPROM I'm looking at, so I just want to see what the settings are. So these are the current default settings. So it looks like it's defaulted right now for an Ender 3 Plus or Pro, based on the size right there for the steps. And then I don't know what the size of the actual bed is, but that doesn't really matter at the moment. We can adjust to all of these. So let me check on the chat before I start really get going on this. Okay, everyone's a little quiet today. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna learn how to load it. So I'm gonna go over to VS Code, and inside VS Code, if I can see it here, hang on a second. We're gonna have to set this up with a fresh copy, so I'm gonna close this. I'm gonna go to my downloads directory. Sorry, it's a mess. I've been doing tutorial work, as you can see. But I'm going to delete this file. I already have an unzipped version, but we can double check to see if we have a new version or not on Marlin. But let's extract this real quick. And then I'll check Marlin. So if we go to Marlin fw.org, we can see if there's a new version, which there isn't, so we're still in the same version. So we'll get this extracted, then we'll go over to VS Code and we'll see what's going on. So it's going to pop a new version. So let's go here. We'll click on Explorer, Open Folder, Downloads, 2.0, 2.0, select folder, and inside here we'll go to Marlin source core boards.h, search on E3_dip, and you can see that it's the 1.0 version, and this is talking about the chipset group that it's in. So let's see if there's another one in here. Looks like there isn't. So this is where we have to go over to Marlin and see what's going on. So in Marlin, we could download the bug fix version, which I already have downloaded. So let's go to that real quick. So over here, this is not the nightly build, by the way, but it's close. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to extract, and then I'll just click extract again. While that's extracting, I'll go back over here. I'll go to File, Close Folder, because we don't need that one. We'll check on downloads in 2 seconds here. Looks like we're almost there. I'm just checking to see if they actually added it to Marlin for the boards.h. It's technically not that different, I guess, but maybe it will be. So I'll look at the chat for a second, see what's going on. Still kind of quiet. So now that this is about to open, we're going to go over to VS Code again. And inside VS Code, we'll click over here to the Explorer. We'll go to Downloads. Apparently I gave myself a shortcut. Let me just get rid of that. Open this, select folder. Now we'll go to Marlin source core boards.h. And inside boards.h, we'll search again for E3_dip. And of course I'm just typing it, so that's not going to work. So let's do Control F. E3 underscore dip. So there's one right here, and there's only one that exists. So it's the exact same board, except they changed the tracings. So that means that when they etch the board or print it with silkscreen, all they did was they changed the pathing of 2 wires. That's what it looks like. But let's see how it functions. So let's go over and see what we got here. So I'm gonna set up the firmware, but I'm gonna use this one for it. So we can technically do it either place at the moment. So I'm gonna close the folder. I'm going to open up the other one because they're exactly the same. So these 2 Marlins, select folder. I'm going to copy, hang on a second. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to minimize that in source. Go to configuration.h, search on motherboard. And the good thing about it being the same name is we can try things out on both boards. So I'm going to set this to -1, and then we're going to set up the stepper. So I'm going to do A4988. I'm going to try the TMC 2208 to start, and then we'll try sensorless homing after that. But essentially we're not going to make any changes other than that. So let's go over here, find the E3, and E3 gets kind of confusing down here, so I don't see it. So we're gonna have to go over to source core boards.h, look for the E3 dip category, which is Cortex M3. It's an ARM processor, so STM32. So let's go back over to platform IO, and it says E3 dip here. Looks like we have 2 choices. Let's try the USB choice. I don't know if there's mass storage, but we'll find out. So let's go to the very top, paste it right here, and try and build after we clean. So let's check the checkbox. This might work or might not the first time, but we'll find out. So it looks like it's building okay. We can even check on it over in the .pio folder. This is actually filling up as we speak. So it looks like it's going to pop okay. And I need to get a drive and actually load it. So let's go over to the desk and see what we got. So I'm gonna pull the power because I don't think there's a drive, but let's double check because obviously it might be and I'm about to screw it up and don't know. So I'll click over here. I'll click over here, and I only have a C drive, so I know it's not showing up. So let's go back, pull this. I'm gonna pull out this, and we're gonna do something special with this. We're just actually gonna store the file in case. So I'll drop this in the computer. We'll go back over to the desktop. We can see the E drive. We can see the cur file. So let's store this someplace. So I'm gonna find something in like the videos. I'll create a folder called SKR underscore E3 dip underscore v1 underscore 1, and create a folder called default firmware and paste it right here. That way we can find it later on if there's an issue. So let's go and start to see if we can load this. So let's find it in the list here. Right click, reveal in File Explorer. Right click again and send it to the drive. So we're all good there. I'll pop out the drive. Go back over to the workbench. Plug in the drive. And obviously we can't do much yet, but let's see what happens. So it's plugged in, it's flashing as you can see. So now it's saying it's connected with that little ding. So let's go over to the computer and see what's going on. So there's no drive. So let's go to Pronterface and try and connect. Apparently we're having issues connecting. So let's see what's going on. So we're gonna have to go to Device Manager. Something may have changed. So in Device Manager, let's go to ports. Now it's 11. So let's backspace, do a connect, and now it's working. So let's check to see if anything changed. So you can see that the actual steps are still the same, except it's 4,000 instead of 400, I believe. Yep. So we know that. So let's set it up to actually do stepping now. So let's go back to the board. I'll check on the chat real quick here. Okay, on the board, I'm going to remove the power, and we're going to have to set up the jumpers for the TMC 2208. So we're going to have to go back to the manual because that's the best way to do it. So in the manual, what we're going to do is we're going to backspace into it, hopefully. E3 dip. Manual, and then we'll scan through here real quick. Okay, so we're looking for UART mode. This is Stepter, SPI mode, and then UART. So UART, it says just one jumper right here. So let's go back over to the board and change that. Okay, so we have that one jumper. So it's in position. Looks like it's jumped correctly. So the next thing we need to figure out is actually power. So let's go back to the manual. We'll actually go to the pinouts. It's just quicker. So hardware, and we'll see if they changed anything. So down here they have power. Looks like this is voltage, this is ground. So let's mark that real quick. So I'm going to take a red marker and I'm going to put it on the voltage one so that I know where it is. And then let's look at the other ones while we're at it. So looks like it's voltage on the left and then ground on the right. So let's do that. And the next one for the heat bed is on the opposite side. It's kind of confusing because this says power and then this says power on the diagram. So I'll show you what I'm doing. So essentially I'm just putting marks on this to make sure that I know where things are for voltage. And then the very last one is the hot end and it says voltage is over here. So that way I know what I'm connecting to. It's just a safety thing I like to do. Then we need to power it. I'm going to use 12 volts. but they have two different power inputs, which makes me very nervous. So I'm going to pick the outer one. So the power right now is disconnected. So we may have to unscrew these. So I just took it out of the box, obviously. So I'm going to try and slide these in, not knowing if they work right away. And here comes the part that gets a little bit nerve-wracking, powering it up. So I'm going to leave the jumper, or excuse me, the stepper out for the moment because I have to grab one anyways. But I'm going to power it and see what happens. So let me just trace my cabling here. Okay, it looks like I got the cabling correct, so I'm going to power it up. And I don't see any smoke rising from it, so that's a good sign. So I'm going to unplug it. Put the power cord off to the side. Hopefully it won't fall down too far. And now we'll put in the actual stepper. So I got to find one. So here's the stepper. It's a TMC 2208 version 3. We're going to match it by color, knowing that the enable pin's over by my finger. And then we'll apply some thumb pressure to put it in place. Next, we'll connect the stepper cable. And then we'll connect the USB. And finally, we'll reconnect the power and see what happens. Hopefully no smoke. So that looks good for the moment. So let's go over to Pronterface and see what's going on. So in Pronterface, let's reconnect. Let's do well, we can't do an M122 because we don't have it set up. We're assuming that we're okay, so let's move 10 on the x-axis. So it looks a little bit jumpy. So I'm going to move it all the way over here for a second and try and move it 100 and see what happens. So it's moving about 200. That's a little bit long. I can show you how to fix that in a minute, but at least we see that it moves. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to connect a TFT display and figure out what's going on, see if it's similar or different. So I got to grab one of those. So let me bring you back to the desktop for a second. And I'll check on the chat. Hey, how's it going? Nice to see you, James. We're playing with the E3 dip today, the newest version. Apparently all it is servo changes. So I'm going to grab a display. It's not going to work right away because we have to reflash it. So here's the display. So I'm going to power down the system. I'm going to look up, after I disconnect this, where the actual TFT display is and how it's configured. So we got to go over to the browser for a second. And in the browser, you can see that it's got the TFT right here and then resets over here. So we know where that little hanging separate DuPont connector goes. So let's go back over to the desktop and connect it. And then we're going to also have to reflash the firmware because it doesn't know that it's going to have this. So here's what I'm talking about for the floating one. So you're going to orient it like so. Slide in the first piece, take the other one and slide it in there. So we're connected there. Next we have to pop this out and put it back in the thumb drive wherever I put it. There it is. So we'll find this, drop it in, place it back in the computer. And then we got to figure out what the port is, and I'm probably gonna cheat. Sorry you guys didn't see what I did, so let me go back to the screen and show you, because I forgot to hit transition. So I connected up this. Essentially you have the floating pin right here, that's your reset. So you're going to connect these 4 pins first, then you're going to connect the reset pin, and we can test that it actually works by plugging it in. It should work fine, except for me having it upside down. But that's the actual LED. It's obviously not going to work right away until we make some changes. So let's do that right now. So if we go back over to the computer, we're going to check first on the website. So I'm going to go up here, I'm going to go to the E3 dip, going to go to hardware. I don't see it here, it's probably in firmware. So I'll click on the E3 dip firmware, and I'm essentially looking for the config.h. I want to look to see what the actual port is. So it's saying 2 and -1. I have these the opposite. They might be backwards or I might be backwards, but you'll see the concept of why. So I'm going to use 2. So I'm going to go back over to Marlin inside VS Code. All I'm going to do is I'm going to click on, hang on, I got to expand the folder, so let me clean this up. The Marlin folder, config.h, search on motherboard just to get in the neighborhood. Scroll up, remove the comment here, and make this 2. And then we'll hit compile again, and hopefully all will be good. And I'll check on the chat while that's building. Hopefully it won't fail. Hey Dave. Hey James. Hey Rob. Yeah, I'm live. I got the board in that you were talking to me about. It's the 1.1 version. I'm testing the stepper right now. There is a small issue with that. Let's see. What is upon 2? Connecting TFT to SKR board. Yes, I'm connecting the SKR to the board. So the compile just finished. Let me make sure I'm in the right place here. So I'm going to go back to .pio, build. Inside the build file, it's the chipset. So I'm going to go over here and right click, reveal in a file explorer. Right click again, send it to the E drive. But let's look at the E drive real quick. There's only firmware.cur. That's because it overwrote the other one and then renamed itself. So let's go back real quick. Right click and send it right there. So we can verify it's there. Now let's go back over to the desktop and try this out. So I'm going to pop this out, place it inside here. Hang on, let me move some stuff out of the way. This over here. This will actually flash it, but we're going to do it with actual direct power. So I'm going to use the power supply. So now it's flashing. I'm going to move this over slightly. Hopefully this will come up as connected, which it is. So we're going to click on movement. Might have to do it this way. Move. And we're going to change it to 10. And then we're going to move the X. And notice how it doesn't move a lot. So let's bring it all the way back over. Okay, so we're going to move it 10 by pressing 10 times. So I'm going to press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So apparently there's an issue still that exists with using Pronterface to move it, and that's because of the 5 volts that possibly comes over it. We'll double check it just to make sure. So I'm going to power down the system. Going to connect the USB. Then I'm going to power back up the system. And I'm going to go over to Pronterface and try the same operation again. Of course, I'm not going to move by 10, I'm going to move by 100. So I'll connect. And then I'll try and home it. Okay. Now I'll hit 100 and see what happens. So obviously, there's a significant issue that still exists with this board, with this stepper, when the USB is connected. Unlike the SKR 1.4 where you can change the jumper to direct power, you still have that issue. So you got to run it from your screen. I don't know if it's going to act the same from a what is it, Raspberry Pi, but I'm assuming so. So let's see what's going on in the chat real quick here. Okay, Guten Tag. Hang on, I gotta think in. Is it Dutch or French? I think it's Dutch. Two seconds here. Yeah, it's Dutch. Yeah, maybe with better software. So let's see what else we got here. James, before the stream ends, would you mind looking at the config file for the SKR 1.4 Turbo? The BL Touch won't deploy. So what's going on with that is possibly where you have it connected. Unfortunately, I can't build up a whole setup for BL Touch in these streams just because the space to put the printer in is a little excessive. The printer stands about, let me give a good estimate, 40 centimeters to 60 centimeters high, or 2 feet high, we'll say. So it takes up most of the desk, and then I have to move a bunch of things around to get it in here. So those tutorials, unfortunately, I have to record parts of separately because they're a little bit involved. But check your BL Touch with your finger. So I'm guessing if it does this, oh, don't worry about Dutch. I pretty much knew it was a foreign language right away. So when the BL Touch is set up, what you can do is you can send you can send me the config over Discord if you want. I can pull it up and try and do a file compare against a known and an unknown. But the configuration is a little bit interesting. If you're not getting a deploy, it could be the voltage is not right. So on the SKR, you're going to have to look at the actual pinout diagram. So I'll show you that real quick. So if I go over to the browser, one of the issues that can occur is related to, we go to Big Tree Tech, and we go to the SKR, then go to the Pro, and then we search for the hardware and then the pinout for the turbo. This is a new drawing, but it's not showing everything because it looks like it's cut off. So let's go back. There might be another one in here someplace. That's the 1.4. Maybe it's this. Nope, that's awesome. So I know there's a pinout right here. I'm assuming they're the same. So servo, you can see it's ground, power, and then signal. If we look at a servo, let me grab one real quick here. On a servo, you can see the order of it is the yellow in this case is signal, the orange or red, depending upon how you see it, is the voltage, and then the brown is ground. So that's in the right order. So another thing that can happen with the BL Touch is voltage on the advanced configuration tab. So if you go over to VS Code and you look inside here, we can click on the advanced tab. One of the issues that somebody else saw was what you can do is search on BL Touch. Check the version of your BL Touch, because there's some important information as to what to configure here. I think it had something to do with this right here. So voltage modes, it says 5 volts. You may have to change or uncomment the BL Touch Force software mode maybe, or it might be the BL Touch set voltage mode. It's been a while since I've actually played around with it, but hopefully in another week or two I'll have that fully documented. Been trying to catch up on tutorials. Unfortunately, I haven't posted the 10 that I made yet. Those will be on Patreon for the patrons first, and then they'll spool out a week at a time on those. I want to do Saturday afternoon. And then I'm also working on tutorials for the SKR 1.1 and as well as the GTR to try and get those caught up. So let me check on the chat here because I know it's getting kind of busy. Yeah, I have actually both boards. I think they're going to react the same way. I think the only difference is they changed the actual pins for this servo on these. There might be one other change that I don't know about. Yeah, I like the board. I just don't like the fact that I have to run off my display to run it versus my computer, which I prefer. But we can run through some of the other functionality on the board. I just got to power it down before I actually touch it. So let me go over to the workbench here. See if I can get this angle better. Sorry, I got a lot of lights on so that you can see things as clearly as possible. But it looks like the sun from my angle. So I powered that down. Now I got to power this down. So we're going to play with the actual end stops. We're not going to play with the thermistors right now because I'm not sure how they're going to operate just right away. So let's go to the pinout diagram again so I can get an idea of what we're seeing here. So on the pinout diagram, if you look at it, you can see that there's end stops someplace. Here we are. So we have the X stepper, the Y stepper, and the Z stepper. These are the minimums. They're using these for, it looks like an extruder detect, but then they have E1 detect, and there's only 4 steppers, and I'm looking at the wrong board. Sorry about that. I'll wake up in a minute. So let's go back and search on E3 dip because I'm confusing myself. So, E3 dip, we're going to assume that they're similar. So let's look for the end stops. So they're right here. So you have X minimum, Y minimum, Z minimum. There's only 2 pins, so I got to use a special end stop. So I'm going to use the switch end stop. I just gotta find one. And the funny thing is, they're usually out in front of me. So here's the end stop we're gonna use. So I'll move over to the workbench so you can see. So essentially it's 2 wires wired to it with DuPont connectors in this case, just so you can see, and then it creates a circuit from here to here when depressed. So I'm going to try and figure out a safe way to do this, so I'm probably going to put some putty down in a second. But first I want to hook up the actual power. So we're going to use the red wire as signal and the black wire as ground. So to do this, I need to look at the diagram real quick. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over. So we'll do ground here and signal here. And then let's see if I can put this in a position that's safe. Okay. Sorry, it's kind of out of frame, so there we go. So let's go back and test this again. I'm just gonna power it up. Hopefully we won't see any white smoke or black smoke. So I'm gonna plug that in. I'm actually gonna plug this in. And then we'll go back over to Pronterface. We'll reconnect. We'll do an M119 because the last time everything was triggered. Now it's not triggered. So I'm gonna trigger the end stop real quick with my finger and do the command again. Now it's triggered. So if I undo it, so we know that functions. Let's test the next one. So I'm gonna power down. I'm going to move these over to the next one. This is the Y connection. Check it again. Plug it in. Reconnect. Do an M119. Looks like it's good. Hold it with my finger. Do it again. It works. Undo it. It's good. And one last time, we'll do the Z axis. So we'll disconnect, connect. M119. It says open. Trigger it with our finger. It says triggered, undo it. It works fine. So that works perfectly fine. Now there's other functionality I haven't looked at on this board very closely. So let's see what we got here. So there's the SWD. I don't want to show you that. That's kind of long and involved. Maybe we could mess around with hot end. Gets kind of scary, but let's see what this port is for right over here. So essentially we have a port right here. I don't know if it's for a display, so we need to go find out. So we can cheat by going to the pinout diagram, and inside the pinout diagram it says EXP1. So that tells me it's a display for a probably a Creality or Ender 3. So I need to find a display for that because I know I have one. Here it is. So let me show you this real quick. So here's the Ender 3 display. It's kind of dirty and I never peeled off the plastic. So it's still kind of dirty, but you get the point. So let's plug this in. It's probably not going to work out of the box, but we can always reload the firmware that we stored just to see if it works. Let's power it up and see what happens. Let me get this one out of the way. So currently it doesn't work. So let's pull the power, pull the thumb drive. We're going to place the old build back on it and see what happens. Maybe they configured it for us. So we'll drop this in here, place it in the computer, and see if the default build actually works. And it's a great way to show you how to bring back a default configuration. So on my folder that I opened, default firmware, I'm going to send that over here. Problem is that I can't use it in its current naming. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to rename this to firmware.bin for binary. And then I'll take off the extension for cur and press enter. And so then I'll just right click and I'll send it over to my D drive, and you can see it right there. So I'm going to pop it out, go back to the workbench, take it out of here, place it in here, and then power it with USB. And I'll get this out of the way. And it's still making a noise, but it's very faint. But it looks like they put a default firmware on there. So it comes pre-configured and looks like the Marlin configuration, but it says TMC connection error, and that's because there's no power. So watch this. I'm going to disconnect this. This is a common error I get asked about a lot. Let me see if I can boost this up so it doesn't tilt around as much. And I'm going to plug it in with direct power and we'll see if we get that error. So it still says TMC connection error. That's awesome. That may be because it's not used to a TMC, I guess. I don't know where that error is coming from. But we can always load the firmware and figure it out. Right now we're using their firmware, so they could have caused some issues that I don't understand. But we'll see if we can figure those out. So I'm going to pop this out, put it back in the drive that I'm hiding on myself. And I'll check on the chat in a second. So if we go over to the desktop, we're going to go back and we're going to go back, and it says firmware right here for E3 dip. So we're just going to download this, hopefully. I might have to go up a directory. So click on the code, download zip, okay. And let me look at the chat. If you want to use the DRV 8825s, there's a different jumper configuration. I can look at that in just a second. That's going to be step dir in the manual. And someone wants to see it with UART possibly. So, or they're talking about the TMC 2209 on the SKR or on the E3 dip. Because we can check sensorless homing and see if it works. We can do that next. But let's first see what's going on here real quick. So it's downloaded. So if I go over to my downloads folder, right click, extract all, Move this over, click extract. It's going to take a second or two. While that's going on, I'll show you where you can find the information for step dir. So inside here, if you go to the manual, it's considered a class of how it moves being step direction, so step dir. So these are the pins you need to set. So I'll pull out the jumper in a minute. I just want to see what it looks like. So let's go over and see if this is unzipped. It looks like it has. It's open. So let's go to VS Code. We're going to close the folder. Then we're going to click open. Let me make sure that you're seeing what I'm doing. Okay. Downloads. So firmware, Marlin, select. So this is the configuration they have set up for their product. So you can see it's slightly different. Let's go to Marlin config. Inside here, we can scroll down and see what's going on. They've named it. They've given it port numbers, even though in this case the display doesn't use that port that I have connected. They've lowered the speed, so it's 115/200. So let's check on the steppers by searching A4988, and they're using TMC 2208s. So I don't know why they have a TMC error. Well, they're not using them actually. They're commented out. So that's why you might have a TMC error, but I don't know. But let's change this so we can try the X stepper as it would normally be. So we'll start with the A4988. This is 1/16 of a step. Whoops. So there we go. I'm not going to make very many changes over here. I'll leave this alone for now. And we'll try this out. So let's go over to the desktop and set up the jumpers the way they have them. So I'm going to pull this. Pull the stepper. I'm going to find an A4988, which this might take a second because I may have moved it. Okay, that might not be an easy one to do. I can do the DRV, which is just twice the normal steps. They're exact same steppers, except for the circuitry on them is completely different, which makes total sense when I'm saying it. So I'm going to pop this off, and I'm going to put it right here, and push it down. And then I'll double check this because I don't want to screw it up. Put that one down, that one down, and I think there's one more that I'm going to have to check. So I'm not going to place it in there just yet. Actually, well, no, I didn't find one. So I found a DRV. Now this one you have to look for the enable pin. I know the enable pin's located right here. So on the bottom of here it's written EN, which is this pin right here. So if I flip it, I can put it in position. But for now, I gotta check the pinout diagram real quick because I get nervous when I move too quick. So I'm gonna go back over here. And as you can see, there's 4 jumpers. That's according to their directions. So we'll go back over here and we'll put one more jumper in. And then I'll reread the directions just to make sure I'm not doing something wrong. But I won't power the system until I know. Okay, there might be a bent pin here. There we go. so that's in position. That should be your enable pin. So let's go over and double check the directions, because I don't like doing things too quick. So over in the directions, it says A4988. It says 1/16 of a step, even though it's in Chinese. So let's go see if we can see it in English just to verify. It's probably back here. No, they accidentally did it in Chinese. Set the jumpers according to your micro-stepping settings. So we're setting it to the highest degree of step. So it's probably M0, 1, and 2. And this one, I don't know what they're calling it. That's usually like the reset or sleep pin, but it's hard to tell. So let's go back over to the desktop in a second and see what we got here. So we're all set with that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna disconnect the display real quick, only because it's in the way, and place it someplace far away. Then I'm going to go back over to VS Code and actually compile. So let me bring up VS Code. Inside here, I'm just going to click on the compile button. I'm going to do a clean just in case. And now I'll build. So it looks like it's anticipating 256 kilobytes for flash RAM, or EROM, or EEPROM, which is rewritable, programmable, read-only memory. I forgot what the EE stands for, but it's been a while. Okay, that's done. So let's do as we did before. .pio build, go to the chipset, find the bin, right click, reveal in Explorer, right click again, send to the D drive, double check it. Notice how the other one renamed earlier. So we'll pop that out and go back over to the workbench. And we'll drop this in. We'll connect this after we move this over. Then we'll connect power and USB. It's going to flash the moment I put the USB in. And I'll plug this in. And then we'll go back over to the computer and see what's going on. So things might change right now, so we'll find out. So let's go over to here. Let's try connect. Didn't connect, so we got to go to device manager. Hang on. Let me change this so you can see what I'm doing. So inside here, it says 9, we're on 11. So let's close that. And this might be because it reversed the ports. I don't know, but it seems like it's off by 2. So we'll connect. It says printer is now online, so let's try and move. So it does move. Now it might move differently than the display, but you can figure that out on your own. I'll check on the chat real quick here. The DRV and 88, or excuse me, the DRV 8825 and the A4988 are the same in that the jumper settings are the same. They have different step indexes. So the DRV 8825 is 1/32 of a step, whereas the A4988 is 1/16 of a step at the maximum step setting set in the hardware. So you also have to change something in firmware. So in the firmware, what you need to do, let me see where I am here. Okay. So actually you couldn't see what I was doing, but I'll show you again real quick before I go over and show you that. So I'm moving it. Doesn't run super well, but that might have to do with the 5 volts from the cable. Or it might be that it needs to be calibrated. But you can hear the strain on the power supply. But let me go over and show you how to change it. So in VS Code, to increase the degree of step for this particular stepper, you're going to go to configuration.h. You're going to scroll down a little bit further where it says default axis steps per unit, and we'll change this to 160. That's all you have to do to double the increment of steps on this stepper. Let's try compiling and reloading just to see if it works. So I'm going to unplug this for a second. It might sound different in a second. I don't know. These steppers are very old technology, so we'll see what happens. So let me see what else we got here. Yes, they can handle more current, being the DRV 8825. The reliability of the A4988 is really good, but I haven't used them in years. Yeah, so I'm gonna load this real quick. Let me go over to the desktop and pull the drive out. Just need to de-energize part of the system by taking this out. Pop this out. Place it in here, hopefully correctly. And then plug it into the computer. I don't know if this will make any difference, so we'll see. So it's already rebuilt. So we're gonna go to build, chipset, find the actual thing, reveal in File Explorer, right click again, send to USB drive, check to make sure it just copied over, go back over to the computer, or workbench, pardon me, pop the drive out, slide it into here, power it up, and then power it up with direct power. And let's see how it runs. So connect. Now let's move it. So you can barely tell any difference. It could be that these also need to be calibrated. And I'm not going to show you calibration in a live stream, only because my desk is a mess. And that requires a clean surface to work with, just for safety. But I made a tutorial on how to do it as safely as possible. But it has inherent risk where you do not want to make contact with yourself or the board. So let's see what else we got here for questions. Yeah, I've got a lot of DRV 8825s. It was my main stepper for a year or two before, or excuse me, after the A4988. But I've moved exclusively into TMC steppers now. I like the complexity of them to a degree. So let's see, what else can we test on this board? maybe extruders. I'm gonna power it down for a second because the stepper's making funny noises. Make sure where you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so we've done, let's see, 2 different types of steppers. Done all the end stops. What else can I do that's easy? Want to do an extruder or maybe a heat bed. Let's try that. I don't have my temperature thing here, but you can see at least the process. So we're using a default configuration right now that we're modifying, so this should be active. So what I have here is the thermistor. This is the connector I put on the cabling. And I'm using a tiny one so that you can see what I'm doing, mostly. So I'm gonna move this over so you can see it in a place that hopefully will make more sense. So I'm gonna place it right here. Hopefully these will reach. No, they won't. So let's do it over here. Hopefully I can get part of it in frame. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna connect to the heat bed, but I gotta verify where it is. So I'm gonna go over to the browser. Inside the browser, I'm going to scroll up. And what it says is the heat bed. Now with the heat bed, you don't have to worry about plus or minus or polarity or whatever you want to call it. So in this case, we can just connect both the red cables. So to do this, I put ferrule connectors on these for safety. I recommend you use them. It's a great way to keep your wires from touching by accident and keeps them nice and secure. So I'm going to loosen this up, and I'm also going to double check after I do this to make sure the wiring diagram is the way I think it is. Slide these in, tighten them down. So in theory those are nice and secure. Now we're going to actually connect the thermistor. Now I've actually tacked on a wire to this, so hopefully it's functional. So let's see what we've got in the web browser. So we've got the heat bed connected. It says HB above it. Now we got to find the thermistor. And so we have extruder thermistor, heat bed thermistor. So let's connect to heat bed thermistor. And I'll show you where that is. So we're going to go like this. And that should be in the right place. Now obviously I don't want to have cables everywhere, so we're going to have to be real careful in how we do this. So we can just power this back up and try it, and we can observe from a couple of different angles. Unfortunately, I can't show you temperature. Well, actually, I can show you temperature. I have it right here. So I have a little heat detector that maybe I can point in the direction of this. See if it works. So it says that it's 24.9 degrees Celsius in my apartment, allegedly. So let's plug this in. Let's go over to Pronter Face. We'll connect to the device. And we'll set the heat bed right here to 50 degrees Celsius. Let me just get that little paren out of the way. And set it. So notice how it's moving up right here. You can hear a little bit of strain on the power supply right now. I'm using a 12-volt one, so it's not too great, but I prefer it. So that's starting to heat allegedly. So we'll wait until it gets up to its target temperature, which is 50 degrees Celsius, which is almost there. So I'll go over to the workbench and show you what's going on. So I'm feeling it right now. It's a little warm. So now I'm gonna hit it with the actual temperature. And it's 47 degrees Celsius. So it is working. So I'm going to actually stop it. And hopefully the power supply will be happy with me, which it appears to be. So let me check on questions over here, and I'm going to disconnect the power for the moment. Now that's already pre-configured in the actual firmware, so let me show you that real quick. Let me just look at the chat. The software was already preloaded on the board. I stored it. And then I wrote my own on it. Then I put it just back in because I had stored it on my drive. So what I'm going to do right now is show you in the firmware what's going on. So inside the firmware, you go over here and we click on config.h and search for I think it's thermistor. You can see thermal settings. So they give you a default that they think it is for the actual sensor. Most of the time it's 1 unless you're using a special sensor. So this is what they're talking about. If you change it to something else, you can pick out the number here and use that. And this case is the extruder, but this is the heat bed. That's what they're referring to, what I just showed you. But remember always to keep thermal runaway enabled, meaning you don't want to have it do a thermal runaway. So there's a default setting they set in here that you should never change. No matter what's wrong with your printer, always leave it the same. Thermal runaway protection. This should always be left alone. That's so your house doesn't burn down or somebody else's next to you. So just ignore these settings as if they don't exist and set it up correctly. So now that we got that covered, let's see what else we got here. Yeah, I'm assuming the bed works kind of well. So do we have any other questions on the E3 dip today? Yeah, that's the default one that's usually made for measuring the temperature. Hobby Rob's asking if 100K is usually the most used measuring temp device. And yeah, the default is usually 100K. And it's the cheapest one. I think they go for like 27 cents. Let me see what they go for. Let me just make sure I'm in the right place here. So if I go to eBay, and look for the 3D printer thermistor, you can see that most of them, I mean, this might be a specialized one, but I think it's 100K as well. This one actually screws into your hot end block, and then it has a little connector that you can connect and disconnect. It's kind of nice to work with. The normal one that looks like this, but these are already pre-wired. So if it comes without the wire, this part's super cheap. But I prefer buying them wired now You can usually buy them in bulk. If you're buying them in bulk, you better have a lot of printers, because if they keep breaking, something might be going wrong, and it's best to figure out why they're breaking on you. But lately I've gotten lazy and I buy the pre-populated ones. I learned how to actually solder them. They're very difficult to work with. So if you're not confident in your soldering skills, or if you think it's too thin to solder with, it might be easier to actually just buy the preloaded ones. They are 27 cents. I don't know why they're expensive. Here we go. So if you buy 10 of them, we'll go with silver. Apparently they've gotten rather expensive. They were super cheap when I originally worked with them. But I guess over time that changes. Or maybe I don't know how many are in an actual container anymore. Let's see if we can add to cart. Yeah, they're still overpriced here. They should be far cheaper. I know a lot of electronics in the last year has kind of gone up. Kind of experienced it with some of the stuff I work with. But let's see what the chat's doing over here. Yeah, I've gotten lazy with extruders lately. So, any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, well, for those that don't know, and those that have been actually tipping on PayPal, thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated. Those who've been tipping on Super Chats, I greatly appreciate as well. I also have a Patreon account where you can see my newest stuff before anybody else. And eventually I'm going to put up, at the end of the tutorial, a thank you screen for everyone. But for the moment, I'm still working out the kinks with doing Patreon. So hopefully, of those people that are signed up, they can tell me if it's working. If not, I'll fix it. Let's see. And it would be the last Marlin with SKR 1.4 Turbo has a problem. You're saying your SKR Turbo has an issue? I'm not sure I understand the question. You can phrase it in a foreign language if you want, if it comes out better for you. I can figure out what you're gonna say. It just takes me a second. I'm not sure if it's Spanish or Italian or Igor or Igor. Maybe it's Russian or Polish. But post it and I'll see if I can read it. Well, I won't read it out loud because I'll mangle it. Marlin 2.0.8. It just came out is what you're saying? Uh, 2.0.8 I don't think is out yet. There is bug fix that's out. We can check real quick. Maybe it happened while I was talking. That's possible. Let's see what we got here. Okay, let's see what we got here. So I got over to the web browser. Hang on, I gotta move the screen over. If we go to marlinfirmware.org, we can check on the downloads. Currently we're at 2.0.7.2 for releases. This may display differently on your actual display. And then the newest one would be bug fix, but that hasn't been given a number. That's usually a development one, so you won't see that right away. But this is newer, but this also has patches and can be buggy. So it's best to avoid unless you need something that's new in the functionality. And then over here is the latest release. And if you don't know about this, normally what they used to do, these two numbers right here used to follow the year. So you had 1.8, which was 2018, 1.7, which is 2017, and then 1.6, which was 2016. Some reason they've stopped doing that because it seems stuck on last year. Otherwise it would be 21 or 2.1 dot something, but I don't know if they're following that anymore. So let me check on the questions real quick. Okay, doesn't appear to be a lot of questions, so I'll let you guys go. I'm gonna get off my feet for a couple minutes. I've been editing for about 3 or 4 hours. Everyone that's stopped by, thank you for taking the time, and I'll catch up with you on Monday. Same time as usual, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday. And everyone be safe, take care, and if you haven't gotten your shot, try and get it. And I'll talk to you later.